Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 2025 edition of the North Precinct Advisory Council. It's a beautiful day. It's been so wonderful to see the longer days and some sun. I think we need this boost and things are starting to bloom. And we appreciate you being here tonight. I always like to start with a few thanks. First of all, you always see my face, but the reality is that the NPAC board is the group that puts together the speakers and does the work behind the scenes. So thank you to Susan Strank, who's our vice president, Andrea Purr, Melinda Jacobson, Diane Vincent, Nancy Rahauser, and Cheryl Bishop. Most of them are here tonight. Also, always want to thank the Seattle Police Foundation, which this year provided a grant to pay for our Zoom license. We appreciate that. And I don't know if we've started to see some folks in yet, but we also get great representation with from the District 4, 5, and 6 city council members or their representatives. So we want to thank them. From Maritza Rivera, District 4, her liaison is Wendy Sykes. Is Wendy here? Oh, look at that. She's just coming in, so I'll call her out in a second. Henry Pollitt, I think I saw Henry. And I don't know if Joel Raphael is here from Council Member Dan Strauss's office in District 6. But I ask each of the three, Wendy, I don't know, you probably didn't have a chance to hear. I just called you out and thanked you for attending regularly. And if each of you would put your contact info in the chat, that's helpful for folks, because one of the things we're always trying to do is educate this group about who they can reach out to for their district if they need help with something. So thank you all for being here too. Make a note on your calendar. We're the first Wednesday of the month. So our next meeting is on Wednesday, April 2nd. We'll announce our speaker a little later. So thank you all for being here. We aren't going to take more time away from our speaker tonight. We're very pleased to have Eleuthera Lisch, who is the director of the Regional Office on Gun Violence Prevention. It's part of Public Health, Seattle-King County. And I am going to make you a co-host so that you can share any slides. And I am going to spotlight you. And then I'm going to start talking, let you introduce yourself and take it away. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Of course, thank you so much for having us. And if I could ask Katie if Ariana could be shared the
Absolutely
privilege, she will be.
Does she also need to be a co-host?
Yes, please. She'll be taking us through the slides. And as that is coming online, I would be just again, I'm thrilled and honored to be here. And thank you for inviting us. I know that the genesis of this invitation came from a presentation I think we were asked to give to the African American Advisory Group, the Seattle Police Department African American Advisory Group. So in the spirit of carrying on our commitment to share the work of our office, we're certainly always happy to be welcomed into spaces. As I share what we work on in the Regional Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which is housed in Public Health, Seattle and King County, one thing I want to emphasize is that there is also, I'll be illustrating things that we don't do. We do not provide services for the city of Seattle. That is the work of HSD and the work of the Safe and Thriving Communities team, who does complementary and parallel work and co-invests in some of our strategies. But the emphasis of our work is on South King County. And so hopefully you will have questions for us and I will be thrilled to answer. But I do want to start off by saying that this work currently takes place in areas of South King County to complement the work that's happening in the city of Seattle. So the Regional Office of Gun Violence Prevention, I will launch in just a second, and joined tonight by my colleague, Ariana Donaville, who is hosting and sharing slides. And Ariana serves as both our communications director and official chief of staff for our program. And you'll see right here a bus banner, which is on King County Metro buses, Together We End Gun Violence, which is part of a joint effort between ourselves, the state of Washington, the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, and a group of community partners who both put on annual convenings and conferences, and also we at King County Public Health host a resource page that's linked on the bus for people who are looking for services and supports, specifically community services and supports if they are impacted by gun violence. So just a taste of some of our work, and I'll get into it later, but part of our work is public awareness campaigns, and this is an example of such. And so Ariana, if I could ask you to move us to the next slide. So in meeting with Katie, I think one of the interests of this group, or perhaps just more generally, is to understand what a public health approach means. And gun violence is a fatal epidemic. The Surgeon General made an announcement last year that gun violence is a public health emergency, recognizing what folks have been, the World Health Organization has recognized it as a public health crisis or a public health emergency since the 1970s. But increasingly, it is a widely adopted and understood recognition that gun violence is a health equity issue, it is a health issue, and that though few folks are involved directly, it impacts our overall community health and well-being. Gun violence is also the leading cause of death for children and teens for the first time in American history since the pandemic began. And it's of note that in treating crisis level matters, that public health often is leading in that space. So we take a public health approach, utilize robust strategies, engage multi-sector folks, foster partnerships, as you can see here illustrated on the slide, to test theories and strategies and to support and promote widespread adoption. So that's some of the efforts that our office does, and you will see in my slides coming forward. So Ariana, if we can go to 3. Some of the functions. So our mission, again, a public health approach. We collaborate with community and across systems to work toward collectively addressing gun violence in King County. We take a data-driven approach, and in-house our data analysts and also our partners with University of Washington's Firearm Research Program analyze data to help make sure that we are driving our services directly towards those at highest risk for involvement in gun violence. We partner with directly impacted communities, with survivors. We do fund and provide technical assistance for community violence intervention, CVI work. I'll speak more to that in a few minutes. And we also support a hospital-based violence prevention set of services. I'll speak again a little bit further in. And then providing strategic guidance and technical assistance for municipal leaders. We work with mayors, with police chiefs, with other leaders, specifically in our communities in South King County, and historically with both the Seattle Police Department at the onset of this work, and the Sheriff's Office and others, and the Prosecuting Attorney's Office, so coordinating across King County departments. Public awareness campaigns, I mentioned, harm reduction activities and events. We distribute large-scale volume of firearm safe storage equipment, and we promote the Stop the Bleed training for community and frontline workers in this community violence intervention work. And we measure our impact through results-based accountability evaluation. So broadly, everything that we are working to implement starts off with results-based accountability evaluation, and then leads to deeper evaluation as our initiatives mature. You will see 3 initiatives that we are supporting. So a community violence intervention initiative, I'll speak more about, the hospital-based program, and then currently with funding from the State of Washington Department of Commerce, we're planning the development, or in the developmental stages and planning stages of a community violence intervention training academy to cross-train street outreach workers, violence interrupters, alongside of law enforcement partners and emergency medical responders. And to that end, we have a group of police chiefs in South King County that are supporting the curriculum development for the academy. And we can go to the next slide. Data-driven approach, I mentioned that. So starting with what we would call a data walk at the tail end of COVID, when this work was being conceived in King County, there was an analysis of where the most disproportionate impact of gun violence was happening, and on trend with the same truth across the nation, predominantly impacting African-American or Black men and boys. Increasingly, that has dimensionalized and to other underserved communities, and we continue to grow our approach to be more inclusive of other communities. But the data still continues to point to over 50% of the victims in our region being Black men and boys. So currently, again, these initiatives are quite focused in that area and supporting Black-led organizations. The most recent data from the prosecuting attorney's office is here, and we use this to guide a set of our strategies and know that while violence is down in King County overall, and we obviously attribute that to the great work of our law enforcement partners and criminal legal partners, we also know that there is contributing factors that are the work that is often hard to calculate its impact because we can't measure what's prevented. But violence intervention programs are also conducting prevention of retaliatory violence, and we believe that they are contributing, and we're continuing to evaluate their impact. We also unfortunately know that youth violence continues to trend up, and there are quite a few factors that influence that, and that's for a much deeper dive and a much deeper conversation. Nonetheless, this work is focused on that younger population, 12 to 24-year-olds right now, and that persists in South King County. So we're very committed to supporting the work. If we can jump to the next slide. So our office serves, first of all, the office was officially launched in October of 2023, and we are affiliated with currently 61 offices of violence prevention across the nation, soon to be 120. Most of them are in major cities in the mayor's offices. Ours, of course, is in public health, but is an executive priority, and the King County Executive launched it in October 2023, and establishing the office with the intent of being able to coordinate and partner with the entities that you see around the hubcap. The spokes of the wheel that radiate out are two of the key partners that we do our work with, and you will see law enforcement and the criminal legal system, other government agencies, community organizations, evaluation partners, et cetera. Subject matter and experts influence our work. So community violence intervention, one of our core initiative areas, is recognized broadly as an enhancement and augmentation to traditional public safety work. And these first responders, or secondary rather, responders, emerging field of practice, have contributed to drops in gun violence as much as 60% in some cities across the nation. So we're very encouraged by that and partner with subject matter experts to influence the work here in King County. We can go to the next slide. We'll share these slides over to you, so I won't belabor this slide at all. Suffice it to say that this is a key guide to all of the bubbles you saw in the last slide. So speaks a little bit more specifically to each person's role. So community violence intervention, I keep referencing, involves community-led strategies and has long historic roots in cities like Chicago and in New York and other parts, Los Angeles, for instance, where there's been long evaluation of and supports for community violence intervention. But violence interrupters are credible messengers in their community, come from the communities they serve, have the ability to access and reach folks through trust and rapport, rapid rapport skills, are able to build relationships, and then they are able to support group violence interventions and support the resolution of conflicts through nonviolent methods like de-escalation, mediation, life coaching, trust building work within the community. Here you see an example of part of one of our public awareness campaigns. Ariana, I will credit, who has actually made national waves by being inspired to create a comic series that illustrates the different roles within a public safety ecosystem, starting with community violence intervention so that young people can be familiar with the work of what they do. So this is an example of one of the violence interrupters that's working here in South King County and alongside of the mayor, mayor, and also police chief in the city of Kent to support Kent's violence reduction strategies. And we can pop forward. Our next slide is an illustration of the work that this workforce, Mark in that last slide, and his teams do. So they respond to critical incidents not to interfere in any way with what law enforcement's activities are, but to support, again, de-escalation and to look for and spot relationships that they may have so that they can follow up after incidents and ensure that they are engaging people and in some cases talking them down and working to prevent retaliations. They're also deploying to the hospital where we conduct an intervention and making sure to support family members and folks as they're arriving. There has been conflict and tension sometimes in the spaces of the hospital, so they work alongside of that intervention. They conduct ongoing conflict mapping and take, key note of who has conflict with whom. Again, this is serving 12 to 24-year-olds. And they're assigned these young people then to caseloads, and this workforce works again to de-escalate them and guide them towards mediation. They conduct safe passage services outside of schools to help young people transition safely from school to their mode of transit, or in some cases home, or community centers and other after-school activities. They engage in hotspot areas. Law enforcement agencies indicate where frequent incidents of violence are happening, and this workforce deploys there to establish presence, to engage with businesses, and to look for ways in which that they can cool down and bring the temperature down in those particular locations. That often involves transit stations where they will then consistently provide safe passage and build presence, and they stop fights, they do a variety of things. I mentioned the hospital-based intervention, which is again a part of the key strategy. The hospital-based intervention has survivors who are themselves gunshot victims, survivors of gunshot injury, who provide bedside supports and services and then guide the victims and their families to community-based supports and aftercare once they transition out of the hospital. From everything that sort of touches that big, bold, white arrow, those essentially are contact points. And other means, of course, school, courts, various different referral sources, community, family, folks can refer young people into these services. But these are the touch points that come directly from and lead to a referral directly from the activities of the outreach workers day to day. And then once young people are enrolled, they receive what we call relentless engagement, which is really high dosage contact, in some cases daily contact with young people, and to keep them on track, to point them toward opportunity, to help them maintain their intention to keep peace. And they're also delivering a cognitive behavioral intervention. It's non-clinical, it's delivered by the outreach workers, and it's building conflict resolution skill, it's building emotional self-regulation skill, impulse control skills. So helping young people do some mindset change work that we know contributes to reducing violence. And then they go into more traditional case management. The work offers family support specialists work with families. They also provide community safety and restoration support. So for instance, this team will participate in a funeral and be there and available to provide community safety and supports for the individuals involved, the families involved, and coordinate with law enforcement in the event that they are concerned about any incidents of violence taking place. They provide one-way notification to just indicate their concerns and seek support, additional support. And then there's evaluation work ongoing, as I mentioned. We can jump to the next slide. And this slide simply goes into greater detail, again, a key code to what I just shared with you, with deeper descriptions of perhaps of what I just described. We can jump ahead. Mentioned again the hospital-based intervention. Here you see Paul and Terrell. These are two examples of survivors who meet bedside and work within the social work department at Harborview Medical Center and meet with every victim of gun violence, regardless of age, and then, or frankly, any patient admitted for gunshot injury, I should say. But they take special care to then refer young people who are victims of gun violence to this community aftercare support that I just described by way of the CVI community violence intervention work. We can jump to the next slide. And just sort of an illustration of how we envision and support a collaborative approach. So this goes back to the very first graphic that we were the hubcap for, and you see our office here again represented. And we wanted to attach this specifically to some of the ways in which we can collaborate with our law enforcement and criminal legal system partners. So working on joint plans, sitting down and co-creating and designing, focused efforts for instance, the municipalities that we work within. It's an effort to align our office's efforts and the agency activities. And it results often in shared protocols for joint response and joint resource deployment. And then we also conduct and share and contribute to data analysis. We have a long-term goal to get to a very traditional focused intervention, focused deterrence body of work that we are, as our office is growing, are working with technical advisors to build out similarly to models they have in, let's say, Oakland, California, Louisville, a couple other places, but the cure violence model, well known from Chicago, or ceasefire models that have been adopted elsewhere, that have weekly and biweekly meetings, shots fired data reviews between law enforcement and offices of violence prevention to ensure that the highest risk individuals are being focused for services. And then that leads to this identifying individuals and groups and neighborhoods that are at high risk. And again, we focus our interventions there, and we can collaborate, again, very, very, I think I'm covering it all, on the focused deterrence and community violence intervention strategies that are complementary to each other. And when we share this to you, you're welcome to, if you're interested, there's a link at the bottom, which will take you to some presentation that's it may be of interest, that talks about the effectiveness or partnership between law enforcement and community in this particular kind of strategy. And then I think that brings us to a thank you. I did mention that we do public awareness campaigns, and we do put on an annual conference. We have been lucky to partner with the Seahawks and use the Lumen Field facility and their hospitality area to put on these conferences. And we have pending, we're waiting on a confirmation, but this year, our Together We End Gun Violence convening, which historically, and our plan is forever, to take place during a National Gun Violence Awareness Week. And so the Thursday before, so this Thursday, the 5th of June, we will intend to be hosting our Together We End Gun Violence convening. And this year's focus is a summit for first responders, law enforcement, 911 dispatchers, co-responders, and secondary responders like the community violence intervention folks. And we'll certainly put that information out available to this group. If you have interest in that, we would certainly welcome you. And the public awareness campaign, these conferences and convenings are part of it. Again, partnership with the state of Washington, and we are increasingly statewide with national interest. So of course, welcome you. And with that, I would be thrilled to turn it over to and respond to any questions you may have of us.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. And thank you, Ariana. I will go over and take a look in the chat. I think Rudy asks, what about employment opportunities through education and business opportunities? Is there better money for those who run and hustle the streets versus a structured opportunity? I'm not sure exactly how. Rudy, if you want to unmute and clarify your question.
Yes, I'm just curious, is there, in some places across the country, there's technical colleges that provide a resource for those that are at risk, not only to learn a trade, but to be paid in that while they're doing that trade, and versus the stuff I see on our streets with the guns and drugs and everything else that goes along with it. There's a lot of money opportunities to run and gun and hustle the streets. And as I've seen wads of cash in some of these young people's hands where they flaunt it. But is there a better way that public health is looking at besides sitting around a circle and having people go out and be mentors and saying, don't do that? And oftentimes, a young person's going to be resistant because the money, it outweighs the touchy-feely part of aspects of prevention.
Thank you, Rudy.
So I'll do my best, Rudy. First of all, yes, I will offer that this is an intensive intervention with individuals who have presented a very high risk carrying guns, involved in illegal economies. And this workforce is connecting them to services. But what I shared with you today, and services, and by services, I mean education and employment and alternatives to the street lifestyle that you just described. But what I shared with you is a primary intervention that has to take place to ensure that they are first connected. As you mentioned, folks are resistant. Relentless engagement is a intensive way of getting to folks who are resistant and helping them to make the choice to take the opportunity to go further with education and employment attainments. And it is the pathway out of this lifestyle. And I would offer that because it is an intensive intervention, there's not a lot of circle timer groups. These are people who can't even sit in the same room because of the conflict they have with each other. So these workers are really working with high-risk individuals. It's not to scale. So as I mentioned, this is not everywhere. We do not serve the city of Seattle, and city of Seattle has its own investments and strategies that are complementary and similar. But I will tell you that in models like ceasefire across the nation, they are best and most effective when they are attached to, as you mentioned, a technical college, employment readiness, and employment opportunities. And while that is not what I currently shared with you, it is what's happening within the organizations we fund to do this intervention. So we agree with you, and yet that I wouldn't be presenting on obviously the work that we don't do, but it is connects to employment opportunities and case management that guides people towards other attainments and supports.
Great. Next question. What do you believe most often prompts someone to take advantage of services and support that's offered?
You know, I will tell you in my experience, and I will offer first that I've been with public health for about 3.5 years, and this is my 30th year in this body of work, and I come from doing it in community, and I also myself was a violence interrupter very early in my career. And to the young person, 10,000 under my care during my frontline work, to the young person, it said a caring adult that actually, or someone, a caring individual who was willing to walk alongside of them while they were afforded transformation opportunity. So that included going to court with them, that included encouraging them to, in some cases, turn themselves in and face consequences. It also involved showing up for them when they were in moments of high need and high crisis and not giving up on them. And those are the things that this workforce is specifically skilled in doing. They have lived experience, they have a desire to give back to their community. They are credible to the young people because they reflect the young people that they serve. And representation matters, young people seeing themselves reflected. And when you are in a particular high-risk lifestyle, seeing an example of someone who was able to leave that lifestyle is one of the most encouraging pathways. Not unlike AA, which is most, widely understood to be one of the most effective treatment strategies for those suffering with alcohol addiction or substance use disorders. For the longest time, folks leading AA meetings were themselves in recovery. So if you think about that model and you think about what an outreach worker is, they are someone who has transformed their own life and are a guidepost for people who are seeking to transform their lives or don't even know that they need to, and they are encouraging that change.
Do you have any thoughts on the legislation that is being worked on in Washington regarding earlier intervention with youth convicted of violent crimes with firearms?
I don't. I don't have thoughts on it, and that isn't to say that I don't disagree with it or support it particularly, but I think that really is that wouldn't be my thoughts. Wouldn't necessarily be, helpful. They would be me considering things in front of y'all.
Okay. Are there other models being tried across the U.S. in the cities you referenced, or is your office's approach considered to be the most effective at this time?
Ours is consistent with and takes a tailored approach. There is no cookie cutter model that is effective everywhere, but there are best practices and there are evidence-backed practices that we have adopted, certainly. And there's also practices that have been tested in different iterations over the many years here in our region that have been exported to other parts of the country. Other people are following our lead as well. So this approach that we take, the baseline approach of this intervention, the hospital-based intervention supported by the Health Alliance for Violence interventions across the country, the HAVI, it is most widely understood to be effective in connecting with people when they're at the highest moment of risk, when they have just received a gunshot injury or experienced a gunshot injury or in the hospital. The violence interruption work that I described, which comes straight from Cure Violence or ceasefire models. And the cognitive behavioral intervention and relentless engagement strategy, widely tested in places like Baltimore and Boston, Chicago, have now been adopted across the nation. So we are taking good stock of those approaches and then working with our community municipal leaders to tailor the approaches that make the most sense in their area.
That's great. Next question. How many staff do you have, administrative versus interrupters, et cetera?
So we are a tiny team. We of the funding that comes through our office, there's about 6 of us. 70+ % of our funding goes directly to community, and we contract through an intermediary for community organizations that provide the services that we described. And I think the sum total all in on the community side is roughly 50 staff, slightly less, perhaps it ebbs and flows. And then, as I mentioned, we have a very small but mighty team internally. But we leverage teams and work in collaboration with the prosecuting attorney's office, let's say, and the sheriff's office. And what we understand is that, and are grateful to hear from all other sectors, is that none of us can do this alone. So we contribute and we work alongside of other, significant and far well-resourced teams to be able to support a regional approach to addressing gun violence.
Okay. What data do you look at to determine success in your programs? And then following on really from your last one, is your department being affected at all by the recent federal orders, in particular the executive order related to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
So let me work back. Well, no, I'll start with the data. So first and foremost, again, our office is about a year old, and while we have been developing this work and preparing to ultimately launch it and beta testing strategies, we are going through a evaluation readiness process to make sure that all the organizations are at capacity to deliver the services with fidelity, and that they are able to measure their impact, and that the quality of that data is effectively uniform across all of the organizations that are conducting these services. So right now, as I mentioned, a results-based accountability metric measures how many people are served, and there's qualitative data in that talks about how better off are they for it, and that is a lot of reporting that we gather quarterly from all the organizations and then analyze both internally with our assessment and policy development and evaluation team. And also we're partnered with the University of Washington on a couple of different grants that allow for them to participate in developing this evaluation effectiveness for community-based services. And then you asked about the federal orders. Well, let me go back to evaluation, because this is really critical. So I mentioned the cognitive behavioral intervention and high dosage contact effort. So when we are really working with resistant individuals who don't necessarily want to engage with positive pro-social options, it can take as many as 30 attempts to locate them before they're even engaged in services. And traditional evaluation might say, this person hasn't transformed their life yet based on, the amount of time they've been identified to be in the program. But when we recognize that we consider success of actually engaging them in the program, and again, that is a high dosage effort to find, locate, and connect them. This is the detail, the nuance to how we are evaluating the effectiveness of the work. So I just want to say that. Secondly, first of all, King County is committed to addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and has not had any, sort of pressure from a federal mandate. Those are internal. And while our office is not funded with any federal funds, and so we won't see a direct impact of that necessarily unless it trickles down through other impacts that happen above our pay grade and, from the state level down. But to date, no.
Okay. Let's see. Henry asks, you mentioned a study from UW. Is that expected to maintain funding with the changes from the federal government?
So this and better answered, unfortunately, by the State of Washington Department of Commerce Office of Firearm Safety and Violence Prevention, our good colleagues, the only other Office of Violence Prevention within the state. but they are funding the University of Washington's efforts. We happen to be a recipient of funding from the state of Washington and therefore have this partnership with the University of Washington. But Dr. Ali Rahani Rabar is a longtime friend and colleague who leads that work. And all of our evaluation efforts are contributing to a body of evidence that points to the effectiveness of this work and the importance of sustaining it so it can mature. It is an emerging field of practice. And most of what we're focused on tonight is one of our initiatives. The hospital-based, intervention is in and of itself doing remarkable things. The training academy, and increasingly our office will continue to seek and depending on resources, mature other initiatives as well. But this, for example, is, so we are focusing in specifically on this, but it is not the only body of our work. And we are evaluating other bodies of our work as well to demonstrate the importance of coordination and cross-systems collaboration.
Right. Yvonne asks, what about convicted juveniles currently living in households where there are adult violent felons who provide firearms? Can there be social worker intervention into this family dynamic?
It's not a direct path, but what is unique about this particular workforce is that in the cases where they, again, come from the communities that they are serving, they have longstanding relationships. They will know aunties, grandmas, fathers, mothers, pastors. And so because they have a deep connection to family and that building that trust relationship and rapport, they're able to suss out some of those risks. And whether they can conduct the intervention or whether they can point to needed supports or interventions, they are uniquely placed to do that. But this work right now does not focus specifically on the risk factors to a young person that, unless they know about it, that are taking place within a household and have no authority to mandate anything. Suffice it to say, they're also informed about the use of extreme protection orders and understand how to guide individuals who are concerned for their safety or well-being to other services. That's part of what they do.
So folks, other questions? Put them into the chat. Give a shout. Is there any area of service that your office is not able to work on or provide at this point that you wish you could?
I just wish we could be at scale, and I really sincerely wish we could meet, the needs of all of our communities. And as I do know, our friends in the city of Seattle, of course, as well. We share your concerns about areas like Aurora, and without authority to do anything, we can say that we would like to be tapped on for strategic guidance and are here to support City of Seattle focused efforts. I think that the work of coordinating suicide prevention and domestic violence support, specifically when it relates to issues of gun offenses or weapons in households, we will continue to work with colleagues and task force and work groups and folks in other areas to increase our ability to support more widespread coordination, facing these very turbulent fiscal cliffs and realities. More than anything, we're very interested in being able to institutionalize our work and bring it to full maturity and to its full potential.
You mentioned earlier that the largest population that you were dealing with was young Black males, but you also mentioned it's shifting and growing. I don't think you mentioned what group is growing or groups are growing in the use of gun violence.
Well, it wouldn't say so much that it's the use of gun violence. I would say it's the impacts of gun violence, because I wouldn't point to saying somebody is becoming more lethal. I would say that we are engaging with communities and gaining a deeper and keener understanding of who is being disproportionately impacted beyond that focus point, and there's nuance to that. So, for instance, there is often invisible violence happening toward the LGBTQIA plus community, and having engaged with the Lavender Rights Project after a series of shootings on Capitol Hill that targeted trans individuals, our office is very interested in figuring out how we might tailor an approach there. And additionally, the services have not, ours so far, have not historically met the needs of the Latinx community in South King County. So we need to continue to increase our capacity and our cultural relevance to meet the needs and address the needs of those communities. One thing I didn't say, and I'd love to add, and you're welcome to look up, and we'll be sharing out more broadly soon, but over the summer months, we recognized both locally the need for and also mirroring great work happening in other jurisdictions across the nation, that in the summer months, as we know, gun violence tends to surge, especially for young people who are out of school time and in unprotected social interactions. So we took a short, intensive engagement strategy, what we called 100 Days of Action, and provided some funding for community organizations to conduct what they called 100 Days of Peace, which increased street safety patrols and engagement. Historically, annually, these workers also work alongside of and have been part of the, all the way to the central command for things like the Seafair events, Torchlight Parade, where they're out and involved and doing de-escalation and preventing fights and supporting community safety. We also conducted a policy agenda body of work that resulted in a joint policy agenda across various elected leaders in King County, and a wide sweeping public awareness campaign, a survey of residents of King County to get their impressions and inputs around their experience of gun violence and hopes that they have for work that can be done. So when I mention other initiatives, while we are very focused, we also adopt and conduct wider scale things and include many, many partners in that effort. And so we'd like to keep you apprised as we continue to move in that direction as well.
That would be great. Casey McNerthney of the King County Prosecutor's Office has kept us apprised about the 100 days of action too. So,
Terrific.
excuse me, we appreciate that. Well, thank you very much to you and Ariana. We appreciate you both being here this evening. I think we learned a lot. And we appreciate, you said you would send the slides. We will include those for access to our members. So we appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Great pleasure. Thank you all so much. And thanks for all you do.
Thank you. All right. Next up is Meagan McNerthney. Meagan Westphal. I just changed your last names. Sorry, Meagan. Let me spotlight you. I'm sure Casey's wife doesn't appreciate that. So there you go.
That's quite all right. So just so everyone knows, I'm Meagan Westphal with the City Attorney's Office. So I thought I'd keep in with the theme of gun violence and talk about what my office does to really address this issue. And I wanted to address and highlight some of the work that we're doing, because I think it's pretty important work and it's pretty neat, some of the things we're able to accomplish. So we don't receive felony level referrals for gun related charges, right? Those are going to go to Casey's office, to the King County Prosecutor's Office. But we do receive a fair amount of cases where there's misdemeanor gun charges, or where we might have the ability to intervene and remove firearms from the situation. And one thing we can do at the misdemeanor level is, when we have cases that are referred to us and that we go ahead and charge, we can request that the court require the defendant to sign a document, and they're signing that under penalty of perjury, and they have to list out all of the firearms that they own. And then we can require them to surrender those firearms to the control of SPD while the case is pending. And we can also require that that suspect not possess any weapons while a case is pending. And we routinely make this request on any case that's involving a firearm, obviously, any domestic violence case, because that's a big lethality factor there. Really any other case where we see assaultive behavior, harassing behavior, or any other sort of violent behavior that kind of gives us pause and makes us think that this person should not be someone who has access to a firearm. And then again, upon conviction or some other kind of disposition on the case, we can make those same requests while the person's on probation, that they surrender the firearms in their possession and not possess any the entire time they're on probation with our court. And one thing we can do with weapons that are surrendered in those cases is we can require them to be forfeited. So they forfeit their weapon permanently to the custody of the Seattle Police Department, and the police department destroys that weapon. So that person will never, ever get that firearm back. And we do that a lot, and it's highly successful. Another thing I wanted to talk about is my office partners with SPD and with the King County Prosecutor's Office on extreme risk protection orders. And I think we've maybe touched on this in the past, but that's kind of, they're known as ERPOs, that's the acronym there. And they're really a great tool for firearm violence prevention. And so law enforcement and families of people or loved ones of people can petition the court to for an ERPO, which will temporarily remove firearms from someone who's either a threat to themselves or a potential threat to others. It also makes it so they can't, in addition to not possessing those weapons, they can't purchase any firearms either while they're under the court-ordered ERPO. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of that work. So our state is only one of 21 states across the United States, including the District of Columbia, that has these types of extreme risk protection laws. And then in Washington in 2024, 117 ERPOs were filed, which is a huge amount. And law enforcement initiated 97% of those. So really want to give a big thanks to our partners at SPD for stepping up and taking on that really important work. But I did want to highlight that families, like I said, and loved ones, friends, neighbors, whoever of a person don't need to wait for law enforcement to intervene and file for an ERPO. They themselves can do that. It is a little bit of a complicated process. And so one thing that my office is taking on is we are going to put together essentially like a how-to and some guidance on how people can make those petitions to the court, provide the documentation, all that kind of stuff, and post that to our public-facing website so that it's easily accessible and people can feel empowered to do that themselves. It's not done yet, but when it is done, I'll be sure to share that with the group. So kind of stay tuned for that. Since our firearms unit started working on this work, and that was back in 2018, to date, we have recovered 6,085 firearms from ERPOs and other types of orders to surrender weapons. So that is a really incredible amount of firearms that have been taken off the streets. And again, hats off to our partners at SPD for their really important role in doing that, because not only are they petitioning for the ERPOs, they're also the ones that have to intervene when we need someone to go and collect the weapons and hold on to the weapons. So really great job there. That's a great amount of firearms that we're taking off the streets. We have only one dedicated firearms prosecutor in our office. Unfortunately, we would love to have more, but we just have the capacity and budget for one. And she does focus on this work, and she works to make sure that any case where there's any sort of indication of possession of firearm or any other indicators that would make us think that this person should not possess a firearm, that's really looked into, and we're working with law enforcement and with King County to make sure that, if necessary, an ERPO is filed, and also making sure that people are complying with those orders to surrender firearms that I talked about a few minutes ago. And so I talked to the people in my office that directly do this work, and I wanted to highlight 2 cases to really show you kind of how important this stuff is. So there was one case where there was a person who was experiencing a mental health crisis, and he was making threats to his family members that he wanted to harm himself and that he wanted to harm others, and that he had a gun and he was planning to go through with it. So his family members obviously reported their concerns to police. SPD then filed for an ERPO. And at the time when the ERPO was filed, SPD went to go recover any firearms. None were found during the search of the residence. He had a purchase history that did not show any that he'd ever purchased a firearm, and his family members had never actually seen him with a firearm. But despite all that, based on his statements that he made to the court and what his family presented to the court, the judge was allowed to place this 1-year ERPO on the person. And during that time, he was then required to undergo mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment. And the family reported a ton of positive change during that time, to the point where at the end of the 1-year period, they felt comfortable with the order being lifted. And we believe that we intervened and we saved violence from happening. We saved him from harming himself and potentially harming other people by using this process. And then I worked on another case recently, actually, with SPD's crisis response team. The crisis response team, based out of the East Precinct, but has officers kind of that work throughout the city with the precincts. They do a lot of this type of work because they're, again, seeing people that are in mental health crisis and whatnot that should likely be prohibited from having a firearm. So one of the officers there does some really fantastic work, and he had petitioned for a ERPO because the respondent was not only in possession of firearms, but during a search for the residence, they found some very disturbing materials really outlining how he was going to attempt a mass shooting in the city. So with that petition for the ERPO was granted, weapons were seized, and this person was not allowed to possess any firearms during the pendency of the ERPO. And so this officer was just doing his due diligence and kind of following up to make sure nothing fell through the cracks. And during this time, he found out that the respondent made 5 separate attempts to purchase a firearm. And he was doing so by lying on the firearms purchase form. And thankfully, each time he went to go purchase, the licensed firearm dealers were doing their background checks. They found out that this person was subject to an ERPO and therefore not allowed to purchase a firearm. And so he was denied each and every time. But the officer reached out and really based on the underlying facts of the original ERPO with the concerning materials about mass shootings and other types of things, this officer really wanted to make sure that something was done. So we actually worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office because lying on a form to purchase a firearm is a federal offense. U.S. Attorney's Office was extremely worried about this as well, kind of based on what I've already described in the behavior. And the officer was able to get this case sent to the U.S. Attorney's Office for federal filing. So it was a really great result. It was fantastic police work by SPD. And it really just goes to show another way in which ERPOs can be used to protect our community by keeping firearms out of the hands of people that are dangerous. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about with ERPOs. I think I saw some questions popping up as I was talking though, so I wanted to.
I think the main one from Susan was, can you describe what is considered a misdemeanor gun charge? I know Casey's put in a couple of bits too, but
Yeah, so some of the big ones we're going to see, right, is like Casey's saying, like if you have a concealed permit to carry, but you're carrying it unlawfully. We also, if someone's harassing somebody by brandishing a weapon, that can be a misdemeanor case. Kind of things of that nature. Another area where we can move to surrender and forfeit firearms is if somebody is under the influence of drugs or alcohol and they're in possession of a firearm. And those cases come to us in the form of DUIs. Often we can move to surrender and forfeit the weapon, but those are kind of the big ones. And I can put some more sites into some of the SMCs if Susan is curious. She can message me.
That's great.
I know I went a bit over.
Thank you. We appreciate hearing some of those stories of success. I think that's really important for the community to know. So we appreciate that. Thank you very much, Meagan.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. And Casey, you're here. Where are you on the screen? There you are. I'm going to spotlight you and say welcome and take it away, Casey. It's your time. Oh, you're mute. Can you unmute yourself? Let me see. I don't appear to have muted you at all, so I can't see.
There's no mute button. Maybe his volume is not down.
Are you using your regular computer, Casey? Because you don't appear to be muted on our side. Is it your earplugs? Technology is great when it works. I think he's switching his options. We'll just hang in there and sing a song. It's too bad they don't have like music or whatever. Okay, now he's connected. Give it a shot. Nope, still can't hear you. Well, see if there's anything I can do at this end. I don't think there is. Well, Casey, how about, do you have time if we go on to the captain and then hold you in just a little bit? Would that be okay if you can like dial back in? Does that work? Okay, thank you. Captain, I am going to find you and spotlight you. Oops, you bounced around. There you are.
Captain said will be back in. Oh, there he is. Never mind.
Oh, okay. Let's see if we can
I
hear
just
you.
bounced out for a minute. I'm back.
Excellent. You're on. Casey we couldn't hear him, so
I
if we
know.
have
I'm
time
gonna
for him
try
at the end. There you go.
Yeah, I'll just hit mute next time and go.
Yes, there you go. That's a good shot.
I'm teasing. I know Rudy mentioned in the chat that there was just a shooting, and it sounds like he's accurate there. I was monitoring it as it was coming out. We have several officers on scene. That's not at 122 in Aurora, but up near that direction, west of that location. So our officers are on scene now investigating that.
Yeah, it sounds like it's about a block away from me, actually.
Yeah,
Isn't that
there's
exciting?
a lot. We definitely have a lot of cops up there. So for the response. So going over stats real quick, and then I'll shout out to some of the things that have been happening in the North Precinct. Overall, year to date, it looks like our crime is down, 16% down in the last. Hang on one second. Okay. In the last 28 days, it's down 23%. Violent crime is down 16% year to date, and then the last 28 days down 6%. Shots fired calls down 9% year to date, and down 28% or down 25% in the last 28 days. Property crime is down 16%, and then down 25% in the last 28 days. With regards to burglaries, down 23% year to date, and the last 28 days down 32%. Motor vehicle theft down 32%, and then the last 28 days down 35%. And then kind of dialing that down a little bit more, looks like rape is down year to date. These are all year to dates. 18%, robbery down 13%, aggravated assaults down 18%. So total for violent crime is down 16%. Property crimes, burglary down 23%. I mentioned that. Larceny theft down 10%. Motor vehicle theft down 32%, and total down 16%. So the grand total for that crime in the North Precinct is down 16%. So with regards to shootings and shot fired calls, the North Precinct year to date, it's down 9% since 2024, and then the last 28 days it's down 25%. So those are the numbers. I know that numbers don't always project the feelings that are happening on the street, but I do want to shout out to some of the good work that's happened in the North Precinct since the last time we talked. So some of the things that I can discuss, let me scroll up here. I've been keeping track of a lot of good things. So I know that there was arrest by our SWAT team over in Magnuson Park with regards to a subject that was booked for burglary first degree, robbery first degree, unlawful possession of a firearm, assault 2, possession of a firearm, a search warrant netted 3 handguns and 2 rifles. So good work there. What was this? Just a couple days ago, there was patrol officers were able to work off of some detective work related to a bank robbery that had occurred on the 24th of February. So officers had responded to the scene, collected evidence, and ultimately the detectives were able to identify the suspect based off of the evidence. That probable cause was developed and a bulletin was put out. Our patrol officers just the other day went out and arrested that person and booked them into jail. Moving along, we had a vehicle that was stolen at gunpoint off of Linden and 102. The North Precinct officers located that vehicle a short time later and arrested that person. Officers responded to a stop, contacted them. 4 were detained, 2 were arrested. The vehicle was recovered and sent down to the vehicle processing room. Trying to look at a couple of other ones here. I actually went on this. I actually went on 2 different SWAT callouts within the last month. One was in regards to a male that had dragged his female companion into his apartment and wouldn't let her go, and then threatened to hurt other people and kill other people. Officers responded and secured that location. SWAT was called, H&T was called, and ultimately, after H&T and SWAT worked through their progressions, that male was arrested. The female was released without any injury, which was awesome. And then that male was booked into jail. Subsequently, a couple days later, 911 call of a male walking around an apartment complex with a rifle and kicking on doors and kicking in doors. Officers responded to that location as well. I was on scene on that one, locked down the whole building, and started, because we didn't know exactly where he was, and then started trying to work out where he was. Called SWAT, called H&T. Ultimately, the officers were able to secure the building and arrest. SWAT was able to arrest that male. Then officers were able to serve 3 different search warrants related, or a search warrant based off of all 3 locations that we had believed the subject was in, and located the weapon that we were talking about, an AK-47, as well as body armor and handguns. So,
Captain, could you define HNT? Is that the hostage negotiation team?
yes, sorry.
Great. Thank you.
That's the police vernacular. We just start using it and we're not even aware of it sometimes. I apologize. I know that everybody was aware of the hit and run, or if you weren't aware of the hit and run that happened at 15th Avenue Northwest and Northeast and Northeast 47th Street. There was a white Kia Soul being driven by a 15-year-old suspect that struck 3 different pedestrians in the intersection there. Officers were able to work off of information to develop where that subject was. They went to the location, and after a foot pursuit, were able to take him into custody. They located the vehicle that was involved in the hit and run. That subject was arrested and booked into jail. And if you saw the news recently, he was charged with 3 counts of vehicular homicide, hit and run felony, assault in the 2nd degree, possession of a stolen vehicle, and reckless driving. And that's all from the charging documents that were provided by the court. I don't know if everybody was aware, there was also a burglary down in Sandpoint where the subject fired a gunshot into the window to gain access, into the slider to gain access into the building or into the home, and stole several items. That subject, right before this call, I got an email indicating that that suspect was identified and arrested. He was identified by us. Ultimately, he was arrested up in Edmonds. He is now in custody, and then SPD has charged him with burglary 1st degree and malicious mischief for that burglary that happened in our area. So he'll ultimately have to deal with his stuff up in Snohomish County and then come back down to Seattle, King County, to deal with the rest. I'm just trying to hit the notable ones that have happened since the last time we talked. There's been a lot of other good work that has happened in Seattle. This one happened the other day. I was monitoring my radio. Officers got a report of a man brandishing a firearm on Aurora, walking up and down Aurora and basically threatening people with it. They arrived on scene, arrested him, booked him into jail for the unlawful possession of the weapon, and located the firearm on him. This was a larger one. GVRU, that's our Gun Violence Reduction Unit, ATF, CRG, which is our Community Response Group, and several other agencies arrested a male out of one of the hotels on Aurora, or motels on Aurora. And part of that, they recovered 4 AR rifles, 1 short barrel rifle, pistol, ammunition, a bunch of other things, all related to burglaries that had been happening. So lots of follow-up work that's been happening in the North Precinct. GIU just the other day arrested somebody related to fencing stolen property with property that was taken in excess of $100,000. Last one that I'll note. I believe that everybody knows about the hit and run that happened 137 in Aurora just the other night on the 28th. A male ran over, after an altercation, ran over somebody, and that person died. Officers were able to locate video of the incident, were able to identify the vehicle. Ultimately, they went and patrolled the area, found the vehicle, found the subject. He was arrested and booked into jail as well. So that's what I have for kind of the good work happening at the North Precinct. I know that there's a lot of things that are happening, but I can tell you that our staff is working as hard as possible with the limited resources that we have, working with multiple different units. I have the gun violence reduction unit, in the intelligence unit, CRG, our community response group, Vice, all sorts of units working in combination and collaboration, trying to address and affect the crime that is happening in the north area of Seattle.
That's
So,
great. Shall I pull a couple things from the chat for you?
sure.
You might want to pull up your chat and look at Alex. There's a variety of things. I won't try to read the whole thing.
I'll start to scroll down through here. So
He's calling out that there are a number of things going on along Aurora at 143rd, 137th, and there's also things at the Bitter Lake Reservoir, etc. So I think it's generally that area.
I'll address some of these if I can. I'll try to remember them. So the 143rd and Aurora, those two incidents, those are the ones I just talked about. So one was at the Tressa there, and one was the building directly across the street to the north of there. I can't remember. So one was the large SWAT call out related to the person who drugged the female into his apartment, wouldn't let her go, and that she was calling out for assistance. And then he started threatening to hurt people and kill people. And then the second one was the person walking around with a rifle and kicking in doors or kicking at doors. So that was that one. And every time somebody puts in a chat, it pops down. So give me 1 second. 137 in Aurora, the increased encampments. Yes, we know about it. Yes, it's been identified and reported to, Find It, Fix It. And I do know that that's on one of their upcoming operations, is to clean that area up. So I don't know the specifics on the date. That's my operations lieutenant is the one that attends those meetings, but I do know that that is on their list to deal with. The Bitter Lake Reservoir has seen an increase in homeless campers. So I would suggest Find It, Fix It on that as well. And then our art group, as well as the City of Seattle groups, go out there and work on removing those encampments. Sorry, somebody put another chat in that populated down again. Unsanctioned group of people using Bitter Lake Reservoir weekly, every Thursday, 7 p.m. to barbecue and distribute food.
That sounds more like parks, perhaps.
Yeah, that one's a little bit tougher to deal with. Where is the Parks Department? Oh yeah. So I would not be able to address that. I apologize. Meaning where the Parks Department is, that's not my field there. So what other questions do we have?
Let's see. So Yvonne referenced, yes, I think that you brought up one of the things she had from the Magnuson Park area. So I think you resolved that. It does keep bouncing around. Rudy wants.
It's hard because every time somebody puts something in,
this is my job too. I know. Rudy wants to call out how helpful Jane Dorr, CSO, has been in Fremont and some of their neighborhoods. Valuable asset helping the community. She has the ability to work with other departments and make things happen. So thank you, Jane. We all think you're wonderful.
Part of that, we are working on trying to address more issues around Aurora right now. One of the things that Jane Dorr is going to be doing, I know that she's part of the CSOs. We've asked them to start going to the different businesses along Aurora, find out specifically what their main concerns are, and try to address them. Law enforcement concerns, of course, but if they have other concerns, we can try to bring those to other city agencies as well. So that's one of the projects that the CSOs are going to be working on starting now. So go ahead.
Great. Yvonne, from over in the Sandpoint area, she calls out another incident that happened over there. I think
Well,
you
let me see
could
if I
have
can find
referenced
that.
that.
I'm going to try to
the
find it if it doesn't
21st.
bounce around here.
While you do that, because I think that's more of a reporting. Aaron says, thanks, Captain Davisson. Have you received any updates on the potential closing of additional residential streets along North Aurora, similar to the closure of 101st?
So I was on a meeting with the mayor's office and Councilmember Moore regarding the safety and the efforts to address crime on Aurora. And I know that that was brought up, but that is not, that doesn't fall within our purview. That's the mayor's office as well as SDOT if that happens. So we don't control, traffic or shutting down streets. That was discussed on the call, but that follow-up would have to be done with Councilmember Moore as well as the mayor's office and SDOT.
Okay.
So.
And Henry Pollitt from Councilmember Moore's office asked if you could share some more information about that incident on Aurora with the multiple weapons found at a hotel or a motel.
Let me see what I can say, because I do know somebody has been booked, but I don't want to go too detailed into it because I don't want to mess up any kind of follow-up or investigation. So give me 1 second. Okay. So the subject was arrested for multiple burglaries, 2 vehicle thefts, multiple counts of having a firearm and theft of a firearm. So in addition to the firearms that I mentioned, there were also 3 recovered stolen vehicles. And I believe that's it. So the subject was booked into King County Jail for several felonies, so related to those charges that I'm mentioning there.
Okay,
So,
and maybe Casey can follow up on some of that.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see, we have someone else who's concurring with the comments about CSO Jane. Jane, we're glad you're on tonight because you're getting all sorts of kudos. That's great. More updates from Yvonne. Let's see. And again, a long list from Alex.
I'll give you I mentioned that CRG, I've requested their presence up here as much as possible. They conducted 2 operations up here recently. One, they located a stolen vehicle that attempted to elude officers, and then on another one, they located and arrested an previously identified rape suspect in the University District too. So they are actively up here. They are working. All the different units are working. They are sending me updates on, if they're coming up here, they let me know, because we don't want to have any issues with, if there's any kind of undercover operations. Patrol really doesn't want to be in that area because it can jeopardize the operation. So they let us know in advance, and then they let us know kind of what the results were afterwards. So
great. And I'm just going to remind folks, if like Alex, you put a lot of information into a long chat, do go back and read, because you'll note that, for example, Henry from Councilmember Moore's office is also trying to provide you with some information. So some of those I'm going to skip over because other folks are trying to provide some information on those. There's some more things with Meagan around gun stores, etc. Let's see. Do we have any additional updates for, after last month about what's going on at Magnuson Park and in preparation for these longer, lighter days? Are things continuing to be organized for?
So I can give you some update on that. So I have been in contact with the Parks Department. I've had one meeting with them, with one of their higher ups to trying to come to an agreement to provide additional officers down at Magnuson Park, basically paid for by, or their operations paid for by the Parks Department. They have agreed to do that. There's an MOU that has been drafted. It's sitting with Parks at this point in time. So once that agreement is done, then we'll work on getting staffing down at Magnuson Park. Again, that's going to be based off of whether we can staff it. Obviously, we're going to put it out to not only the north end, but other officers throughout different precincts to see if we can staff that. So,
that's great.
And then I've also put in a request to have the park closed at 10 p.m. rather than 10:30 or 11, just to kind of have people leave a little bit sooner so that we have less crime in that area.
Yeah. Okay, Carlo asks, has SPD or the North Precinct been provided any information that you can share regarding the mayor's recently announced Northern Lights plan for Aurora?
Can you explain the Northern Lights plan? I may not be as adept on that.
Carlo, I'm not familiar with that either. Can you unmute yourself and very briefly tell us what that is?
Yeah, the mayor announced during his State of the City address that he was going to prioritize Aurora as a project in the upcoming year. I said he was going to be gathering stakeholders. So my question was, has SPD been involved or provided any information about this plan, since they may be a stakeholder in this?
Thank you.
So I have been tasked by my chief to start working on a plan to address the concerns along Aurora. Please note that it's a 4-mile stretch, which you're all aware of. There's a lot of different businesses, a lot of different issues that are going on along Aurora. So kind of some of the things that I'm talking about, getting multiple units involved, getting different officers patrolling the area as much as possible, are going to be in that plan. I mentioned meeting with Councilmember Moore in the mayor's office at the end of February, which was the discussion on the Aurora safety plan to see what we can do to improve that area.
Great. I am going to give Casey a couple minutes, but before we go to Casey, I want to just check in with Marcus Johnson from the U District. You forwarded a letter to NPAC, which we provided to the captain. You wanted to highlight some of the things going on in the U District. Did you want to very briefly unmute and address a couple of those things? I will tell everybody listening that we have put the letter in our files for Google so that when you get the minutes, you can find that letter there. Marcus, do you want to speak for just a moment?
Sure. And first off, big thank you to Captain Davisson and SPD, Officer Terry Whalen and Mike Kazan and whatnot for working with us on tackling some of these issues. So we talk with them frequently, but we just wanted to highlight in the scope of the entirety of the North Precinct, some of the public safety concerns that are that we're dealing with in the U District. Primarily, we have the drug market that's really taken root at 47th and University, and kind of in a 2-block radius of that way. We have upwards of 40 people engaging in dealing and consuming drugs in that area. We've also had a couple incidences of gun violence over the last few months. We just had a shooting outside of at 50th and University last week, and then we had the couple of shootings over the last couple of months, one in November, one in December, and then that most recent one. And so we just wanted to highlight that we're definitely struggling with a lot of those, and a lot of our businesses. We're fielding a lot of concerns from our businesses and our residents that they're just not feeling safe in their businesses. We've had a couple places shut down recently. We had a Goodwill leave the app, we had Target leave the app. Both of them cited public safety concerns, and they're both right there in the heart of the drug ecosystem. We also had, back in 2020, we had Starbucks shut down right at that corner too. So we have a lot of our corporate businesses leaving, and a lot of our small businesses struggling to make ends meet. So yeah, we highlighted some of those things in the letter, but just happy to talk to anybody who would like to talk more about that. And thanks for giving me a couple of minutes to talk about those concerns.
Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, I do know we have talked about this. I do know that I have made our community response group aware of it. And so whenever they come up here, they basically try to address the concerns that we have. So they will try to, go along Aurora and address any kind of crime issues there, go to the University District, go out to Lake City, go down to Magnuson, and try to hit different areas that are considered more of a high frequency location and see what they can do to address it. Some of the things that I can't share as readily is the operations that are happening with our narcotics unit, but I will say they are making, they don't go after the street level crime, they go after the very high level crime. The people that are actually manufacturing or, pushing the drugs out for the street level crime. And I've been made aware of 2 different operations within the last month that were very significant, and large amounts of narcotics as well as money and as well as firearms have been taken into custody based off of investigations that they've worked their way back up and arrested significant dealers. So we are trying to do that as well. And then in addition to your concern, I know that you had mentioned it, I had also put out to our university district officers to make sure that they're providing as much attention when not on calls in the areas that you mentioned. So,
Thank you.
yep. And I'm happy to meet again and discuss what we have. So,
Great. Well, I think we've gone through the gamut. How about if we give Casey the spotlight back and he can give us an update too? Anything else you'd like to add for the good of the order, Captain?
no, I just want to thank you. I appreciate this outlet and the ability to kind of hear the concerns as well as, SPD doesn't always get a lot of opportunities to let you know what we're doing, especially from the precinct level. I know that we'll push out, major incidents, but, hearing those day-to-day operations and the fact, today, to give you an example of how well our officers are out there working, we got a request from the prosecutor's office to arrest somebody that failed to show up for court. That the request went out at 5:30 or 5 o'clock. At 6:30, that person was in custody because the officers went out and kind of scoured the location and located that person. So, they were arrested on the warrant that was issued an hour and a half earlier, which I think is phenomenal. Our people are really trying to do what they can with the staffing that we have. So,
Great. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And we will see you again next month. All right, Casey, there you are.
That really is great work to go and to pick up that person so quickly and to know where to go and to get that without any kind of other serious incident, without other injuries. And so what the prosecutor's office will do from this point is go back to court and say, here's the here's the concern for public safety. Here's why we think a high bail is appropriate. A few things to kind of go off of what the captain mentioned. That SWAT case that was rush filed. Rush file means to file it within 3 days when we get that. And we routinely do that when we get those cases from SPD or others, particularly cases of gun violence, but also repeat property crime. Because when you file it within those 3 days, which is a really tight a turnaround for the Seattle police investigators, that means we can ask for the court to hold somebody. That standoff, I also believe was charged too. That the 15-year-old, we rush filed on him. He was somebody who had been previously convicted of a burglary and theft and robbery. It's just that the way that the law writes the penalties for juveniles is not what many people expect it to be, and that sometimes works if you don't have extreme cases, but we will keep going to court to say, hey, here's what we see as a major concern. I know that there's a lot of focus around Magnuson Park, and we're going to keep focusing on that. Like the captain was saying, gun violence year to year is down. It doesn't matter a whole lot if you have concerns about the park and about the gun violence in your neighborhood, or even if you just don't feel safe, regardless of the numbers. That's why King County prosecutors will keep going back to court. The person who's alleged to be one of the key participants in the Stoneway BECU ATM theft was in court this morning. That was continued, the arraignment on that case. He's also charged by King County prosecutors in a rape and assault and a case that was sent by the sheriff's office. And then there was 3 other ATM charges, one out of Magnolia, one out of Greenwood, and then one in South Seattle. There's certainly the possibility that we get more or other co-defendants. And so if we get those, we'll act on it right away. That hit and run felony out of North 137th and Aurora Avenue North, We filed that this afternoon as a hit and run felony. When you leave the scene and someone dies, that's the charge that I believe we can prove. And so we're going to take that to court. If there's additional information that we get from investigators, of course, we'll take a look at that. We've also heard from our council member Rivera's office and our council member Moore's office from them directly. And so we appreciate the work from each of them, and also from Bruce Harrell's office too, from the mayor directly and from his staff. And so that communication, that collaboration will keep happening. The rape case that the captain mentioned out of University Way, I think it was the 4300 block. It was a really helpful investigation that Seattle Police did. It was a stranger rape case in 2024. They certainly didn't forget about it, and after several months, referred that case to us this month. We brought it to court right away, and it's a very significant charge, and so that's hopefully reassuring for folks to see that collaboration there. Let me check the chat to see if there's any other things to address.
I think we're kind of all over the place. You have to scroll up a ways because originally you were going to be earlier.
Oh yeah, and we certainly appreciate the collaboration with Ann Davis' office. Meagan and I are on the phone. It seems like 3 or 4 times a week, and a lot of other people from our offices are too. And so there's a whole lot that goes on behind the scenes, and I hope that even though you don't see it, it is reassuring to hear about it, even if sometimes we have to be vague because of ongoing investigations. There's a new message here. Of course, like, okay, cool.
I think we're doing pretty well tonight.
Yeah,
We covered a
all right.
lot. Captain gave quite a few updates, so I think we're doing pretty well. I think we're gonna, unless you have something else to add, I think this time we're gonna like wrap up right on time.
Well,
Holy
this is
cow.
great. Thanks, everybody. It's good to see you. We'll see you next month.
Thank you very much, Casey. Well, everyone, again, thank you for joining us tonight. Mark your calendars for the first Wednesday of April, the 2nd, and we will see you then. It was a lively discussion. I want to call your attention to the fact that not only do we have a Facebook page, but we now have a YouTube channel. And remember that if you know someone who missed this recording, we will include a pointer to where they are all now parked out on YouTube. And so they can see anything in the last year or so if it was on Zoom. So we hope that makes your lives easier. It's now a constant link, so you don't have to have the email with the link in it. You just go to the YouTube channel. So we hope that makes it easier to share this information. So thank you all once again for joining us. And we're going to ask the board to stay on. And for the rest of you, we're going to say, have a great evening. Good night.